The Chinese Communist Party's (CCP) Coast Guard vessels entered the waters around the Diaoyu Islands for patrol, further escalating tensions between China and Japan. At the same time, the CCP has mobilized specific political figures in Taiwan, pro-Beijing media personalities and organizations to make anti-Japan remarks. With this kind of hybrid coercion, both Taiwan and Japan have become victims. Don't miss the next drop, subscribe and hit the bell. CCP Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian posted on X, quoting the English version of the Potsdam Declaration, warning Japan not to cross the line. On November 16, Mao Ning also posted on X, citing the Taiwan-related content in the 1972 China-Japan joint communiqué, admonishing Japan that, no matter who is in power, Japan must keep its promises. But the CCP conveniently forgets that it has long called the Sino-British Joint Declaration signed on December 19, 1984 a mere historical document, and refuses to honor its commitment to one country, two systems and 50 years unchanged. What kind of game is this? Isn't it a textbook case of double standards? In the CCP's eyes, Japan is a defeated country from World War II and must wag its tail and behave. It did not expect Sanai Takaichi to be so tough, making Xi Jinping furious, prompting him to overnight instruct the foreign ministry to lodge stern representations with the Japanese ambassador to China, escalating step by step and pushing the situation further and further. The root cause is likely that Xi Jinping softened in front of Trump and did not dare raise the Taiwan issue, which made him feel he lost face. With a stomach full of anger and nowhere to vent it, Takaichi just happened to present herself as a soft persimmon. She thought he could vent freely on her, but instead he kicked an iron plate, producing the opposite effect and further consolidating the unshakable alliance between the United States and Japan. CCP Coast Guard enters Diaoyu waters, China-Japan tensions rise. On November 16, a statement from the CCP's Coast Guard said that a fleet of Coast Guard vessels had entered the waters around the Diaoyu Islands, called the Senkaku Islands by Japan, to conduct rights protection patrols. This shows that tensions between China and Japan continue to escalate. On the same day, Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense reported that in the previous 24 hours it had detected 30 sorties of PLA military aircraft and 7 warships operating around the Taiwan Strait. The day before, Taiwan's Defense Ministry stated that the CCP again launched what it calls a Joint Combat Readiness Patrol, with the purpose of harassing the airspace and waters surrounding Taiwan. Taiwan dispatched aircraft and vessels to monitor the situation throughout. Will the CCP launch simultaneous operations against Taiwan and Japan? Taiwanese media outlet Up Media reported on November 15 that Vice President Xiao Baikim made a surprise visit to Europe and achieved great success. President Tsai Ing-wen then completed her European tour and returned home. She posted on Facebook, stressing that letting the world see Taiwan is everyone's responsibility, declaring, "As long as Taiwan needs me, I will be here." At this moment, Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi made remarks that if something happens to Taiwan, something happens to Japan, which sent the CCP into a rage. Beijing began jumping up and down, opening 2 fronts against Taiwan and Japan at the same time. Following a series of actions such as summoning the Japanese ambassador, the CCP Foreign Ministry's Consular Affairs Department issued a travel warning for Japan. The next day, China's Maritime Safety Administration website released a navigation warning stating that from the 17th to the 19th, every day from midnight to midnight, live fire exercises would be carried out in parts of the Central Yellow Sea. The exercise area is close to the overlapping exclusive economic zones, EEZ, of China and South Korea, highly sensitive in strategic terms and clearly aimed at Japan. At the same time, the CCP mobilized specific political figures in Taiwan, pro-Beijing TV pundits and organizations to issue anti-Japan statements. Taiwanese national security officials analyzed that one of Beijing's main goals was to divert attention from the successful visits of Xiao Baikim and Tsai Ing-wen. Diplomatic observers judge that, after suffering a series of setbacks, the CCP is very likely to launch high-profile countermeasures, including initiating public opinion warfare inside Taiwan and suppression in the international arena. On the one hand, this is meant to knock down Taiwan's momentum. More importantly, it is to give an explanation to the domestic audience in China. Taiwan must be on high alert. Well-informed sources bluntly state that the model of combining verbal violence, economic pressure, and military intimidation has become the CCP's typical method of external coercion. This falls under what international security studies call hybrid coercion. Taiwan and Japan are both victims. The CCP's double standard. On November 15, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian posted an excerpt from the English version of the Potsdam Declaration on X. The excerpt came from Article 8 of the Potsdam Declaration, which in context defined Japan's post-war territorial boundaries and reiterated that Japan must return occupied territories to other countries. Lin wrote, "The terms of the Cairo Declaration shall be carried out and Japanese sovereignty shall be limited to the islands of Honshu, Hokkaido, Kyushu, Shikoku, and such minor islands as we determine." Subsequently, on November 16, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning also cited the Taiwan-related section of the 1972 China-Japan Joint Communiqué on X, posting 4 bilingual, English and Japanese, graphics, stating that, no matter who is in power, Japan must keep its promises. The Potsdam Declaration was issued on July 26, 1945, during the Potsdam Conference, jointly proclaimed in the names of U.S. President Harry Truman, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill and Chairman of the National Government of the Republic of China Chiang Kai-shek. The Sino-British Joint Declaration was signed in Beijing on December 19, 1984 by then Chinese Premier Zhao Ziyang and British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. The declaration promised that Hong Kong's existing social and economic system and way of life would remain unchanged for 50 years and that, under one country, two systems, it would enjoy freedoms and judicial independence different from mainland China. On June 29, 2017, on the eve of the 20th anniversary of Hong Kong's handover, UK Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson released a statement saying, "The commitments we made to Hong Kong in the joint declaration remain as strong today as they were 20 years ago." He said he had no doubt that Hong Kong's future success would depend on the freedoms and human rights protected by the joint declaration. Unexpectedly, this carefully worded statement triggered a strong backlash from the CCP regime. At a regular press conference, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lu Kang responded, "Now that Hong Kong has returned to the motherland for 20 years, the Sino-British Joint Declaration, as a historical document, no longer has any practical significance and has no binding force on the central government's management of Hong Kong." Think about it, only 20 years after Hong Kong's handover, the CCP turned its back and refused to recognize the legal binding force of the Sino-British Joint Declaration. The Potsdam Declaration was issued in July 1945, the China-Japan Joint Communiqué was signed in 1972. Both are earlier than the Sino-British Joint Declaration. Yet in the CCP's view, the older documents carry more legal force and Japan must abide by them, while the more recent Sino-British Joint Declaration has become a historical document. What kind of logic is this? The CCP is a regime that cares about the size of fists. It believes that since its fists are now bigger than those of Japan and Taiwan, it can bully both countries at once. The CCP's shrinking fist. In fact, the CCP's fists have already shrunk amid internal power struggles. The Financial Times reported on November 14 that when Xi Jinping presided over the commissioning ceremony of the aircraft carrier Fujian this month, 3 senior military officers believed to be critical in the Navy's chain of command were conspicuously absent. In footage broadcast by CCP state broadcaster CCTV, Navy Commander Hu Zhongming, Southern Theater Commander Wu Yanan and Political Commissar Wang Wenquan were all nowhere to be seen. Their absence reflects a new round of purges in the PLA that has spread to many key command posts, raising questions about the training and combat readiness of the Chinese military. A U.S. official familiar with the situation said, "They are trying to maintain a facade of calm, but this has certainly affected the PLA's frontline operations." Public opinion holds that internal CCP infighting has left senior commanders in the PLA in fear for their lives, morale shaken and the possibility of a military invasion of Taiwan very low. The greater concern is CCP spies like Wu Shi and Wu Rujui who have long infiltrated Taiwan's internal system. The backfire of the CCP's wolf warriors. For Japan, the CCP strategy has backfired. Sanai Takaichi's approval rating has risen sharply, while the U.S. Japan friendship has been further strengthened. According to a national telephone poll conducted by Japan's Kyodo News on November 15 and 16, Takaichi's cabinet enjoys a 69% approval rating, maintaining a rarely seen level of support in Japanese political history. The disapproval rating has dropped from 19% to 16.5%. The report noted that because Takaichi stated in Diet questioning that a Taiwan emergency could constitute a survival-threatening situation in which collective self-defense could be exercised, the survey asked respondents whether they support this view. The results showed that support plus 10 to support reached 48.8%, while oppose accounted for 44.2%. Regarding Takaichi's proposal to increase defense spending to strengthen Japan's defense capabilities, 60.4% said they support it and 34.7% said they oppose. Another Kyoto report stated that the Japanese government is working hard to deal with the CCP's increasingly strong backlash to Takaichi's Taiwan-related remarks in the Diet. Although the Japanese government refused the CCP's demand that Takaichi retract her comments, with a government source saying, "We simply cannot comply," Tokyo is also concerned about possible economic consequences of countermeasures, such as restrictions on rare earth exports. Although Japan has called for summit-level dialogue to ease tensions, resistance appears to be substantial. The report said the CCP's response has escalated to the point of calling on its citizens to avoid traveling to Japan, something beyond Tokyo's expectations. A government official expressed concern, saying, "We are now at a crossroads. If the situation continues to worsen, it could escalate into economic retaliation." Kyoto also reported that Japan hoped for a meeting between Prime Minister Takaichi and Chinese Premier Li Qiang on the sidelines of the G20 summit, but a foreign ministry source said, "Nothing has been decided and we don't know what will happen." As the CCP steps up pressure on Japan, U.S. Ambassador to Japan George Glass has repeatedly posted sarcastic comments. On November 15, he posted a picture of a Christmas card on X, thanking CCP Ambassador to Japan Wu Jianghao, Consul General in Osaka Xue Jian and other CCP Wolf Warriors for their efforts in further deepening the unshakable U.S. Japan alliance. Glass's humorous and sarcastic post sparked widespread discussion on Japanese social media. Some praised him for showing composure and wit, while others worried that joking about China could stir up further waves. Is Xi Jinping deliberately picking a fight or digging his own grave? On November 14 at 2:56 a.m., the CCP Foreign Ministry released a statement saying, on November 13, 2025, Vice Foreign Minister Sun Weidong, acting on instructions, summoned Japanese Ambassador to China Kenji Kanasuji to lodge a stern protest over Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi's erroneous remarks on China. Commentators have noted the phrase acting on instructions, believing this is not a mere diplomatic formula but a direct order from the CCP's top leadership, evidence that Xi Jinping's humiliated rage has escalated. The timing of the Foreign Ministry's news, just before 3 a.m., shows extreme urgency. Why? Because Xi had just softened in front of Trump and did not dare raise the Taiwan issue with him face to face, swallowing his anger with nowhere to vent it. Just then, a soft persimmon seemed to appear. Japan's new Prime Minister Takaichi made remarks about a Taiwan contingency. Is this a prelude to Xi using force against Taiwan? Perhaps. Since the CCP lacks every aspect of timing, geography, and popular support for an invasion of Taiwan, its pressure on Japan may be a way of testing the waters to see how the international community reacts. Taiwan emergency is a Japanese emergency reflects Takaichi's deep insight into Japan's national security. This insight stems from Japan's geopolitical reality. Once the Taiwan Strait falls into chaos, Japan's energy routes, semiconductor supply chains, and even the security of Okinawa would collapse overnight. First, the Taiwan Strait is the lifeline of Japan's global supply chain. In 2022, 32% of Japan's imports and 25% of its exports, worth nearly $444 billion, had to transit the strait. If the Taiwan Strait is blockaded or embroiled in conflict, Japan's economy would face catastrophic disruption and global trade losses could exceed $2 trillion. Second, energy security would be on the brink. More than 95% of Japan's crude oil imports depend on Middle Eastern routes that must pass through the Taiwan Strait. Any interruption would trigger fuel shortages, drive up oil prices, and cause industrial shutdowns. Third, the semiconductor industry would be a disaster zone. Taiwan produces 92% of the world's advanced chips. Japan's automotive, electronics and AI industries rely heavily on this supply chain, with over 60% of global semiconductor imports involved. A break in the supply chain could cause Japan's GDP to suffer short-term losses amounting to trillions of yen. On an even deeper level lies the military security threat. In a conflict, Okinawa bases would be directly impacted, and 42.1% of Japanese people already regard a Taiwan contingency as a survival-threatening situation. Xi Jinping's escalating, humiliated anger toward Japan may ignite the powder keg of East Asia and turn a Taiwan Strait crisis into the grave that buries the CCP.